This download was produced by the Ecomedia Collective, a social business focusing on sound, sharing and social change. More information? See the website at soundsharechange.com. That's soundsharechange.com.
Okay, well, welcome back this afternoon to the final session, and great to see so many people having sort of lasted the day with all this talking and communicating that we began the day with. What I will remind you, just whilst you're listening to this next session, remember the pink forms? The gateway to further support and further sessions like this. So if you would be so kind to make sure that you note any sort of comments, both positive and opportunities, shall we say, for the organisers to go forward. And this does help to, obviously, as we said earlier, secure funding for sort of future events and future support. So it is really, really important. And the really nice bit for you is that there's chocolates at the end for people who do complete them and hand them in. I knew that would always work. It's brilliant. Right, so for the final session, I'd like to introduce Neil Bennett from the BBC, editor of our local sort of news programme Points West, which some of you may well have come across, slightly well known. And Neil is going to, sort of over the next sort of half an hour or so, give us a little bit of an insight into what we call the Anchor Agreement, which is something that kind of sort of, for me, goes full circle with where we started off at the beginning of the day, where I started by saying, you know, this is as much about you as it is as much about hearing from others. And for me, the Anchor Agreement is all about this idea of really joining together both the resources and the experience and the knowledge from people like the BBC with the real worlds that you're actually living in. So I'll introduce Neil, and we'll start off really, sort of, Neil, if you could give us a little bit of a definition as to, from the BBC perspective, really what the Anchor Agreement's all about.
Hello, everyone. It's really a lot of things that were happening already within with the relationship with the BBC and this city. It helped to sort of bring all those things together and actually grow a whole bunch of other things as well. It was re-signed last year, I think, with the appointment of George Ferguson, the election of George Ferguson as the city's mayor, as the Bristol Partnership. And it's been going since 2009. And essentially, it brings together, it recognises that the BBC is a significant media organisation within this city and has a unique role within this city because it is a publicly funded organisation. It has a whole bunch of people sitting behind that facade on White Ladies Road who do a wide range of things, from the Natural History Unit, making those amazing programmes like The Blue Planet and Human Planet, to there's a big Radio 4 contingent there making everything from Poetry Please to Any Questions. There's a factual department making everything from Antiques Roadshow to DIY SOS. And there's my gang who are making Points West, Radio Bristol, and local news website material as well, and a plethora of other things, creating a whole media hub, if you like, in the city. But it spreads out. The BBC's been here since the war, since the Second World War, on that site, in fact, on the very corner of that site on White Ladies Road, and has built out and out. Points West has been going over 50 years there. So there's a sort of heritage with the city. And there's a recognition that actually there's a responsibility that goes along with that. We've got involved with organisations like Knoll West Media Centre, other organisations and independent production houses in Bristol that have, a lot of them who've happened in the city because of the BBC being here. So there's a creative industry in the city, and this was an attempt to bind that in with the City Council and to recognise opportunities for real things, not just an agreement that's signed, yes, we will work collaboratively. There are real things happening as a result of that. Projects like, and I'm reading from the actual partnership agreement here, reading buddies, talent ticket. Talent ticket is an idea that came out of trying to introduce people to the world of working in the media, much younger than those that are studying for GCSEs or A-levels, and try and introduce people, a wide range of people, to the media and work within the media and the different aspects of it at a much younger age. Face-to-Face is another project, works similar with slightly older teenagers, introducing them to the kind of opportunities there might be within the media. And that's not just the BBC here. It could be anything. But for me, the partnership is more than just the activities it does. It's a kind of, it integrates the media, and particularly the BBC, with the city. We were talking about it just beforehand, and it helped to kind of frame it for me. There are other cities in the UK that have lost bits of the BBC or other bits of media, and there's kind of a creative loss there. And it's one of the things you only realise is gone when it's gone. And you only need to look at some of the other cities where things have been moved or things have gone, and there's a bit of a hole. And we're very lucky in this city. Stuff has been moved here. Other stuff has moved away. Casualty several years ago was moved away because Cardiff became a sort of a centre of drama production. But Bristol's got, I think it's got and certainly in terms of factual production for the BBC, is a major player, and all those programmes are now made here in Bristol, which surprises a lot of people because they're national programmes, and they're made here, and the people that make them draw their influences from living in this city and in and around this city. So for the BBC, it gets an awful lot about, it's that corporate, I'm just saying, I don't really recognise it as corporate responsibility. It's just about, well, why wouldn't you do that? As a public organisation, be more integrated with your local community, because through that we reflect to our programmes an understanding of how this city ticks, this region ticks, and as a result, how the nation ticks, hopefully.
So how would you feel then people sort of in the room here now can really sort of actively engage with the BBC? What kind of things would they be looking at to become involved? A whole range of things, I think. I think there are you can access this agreement online. I think it's on the BBC pages, but it's probably easier to find through the City Council pages. And you can see the kinds of things we're involved with. And really, those could potentially form an idea of people that actually, if this organisation is involved in that, maybe there's something I can do as part of it. And it's relatively unique. It's the only partnership of its kind in the country. So there's an opportunity to make contact and say, what about, can we work on this basis? Is there anything the BBC can do to help me do this? And there might well be, that won't be necessarily coverage on Points West, but it might well be some assistance in terms of expertise, volunteering. There's a lot of, it's an overused phrase, but there's a lot of outreach the BBC does as a whole group of people at Wide Ladies Road that are doing a lot of that work. And through that, I'm quite often supplying editors or camera crews to sort of help, not make things happen. It's not a free ticket to some video journalism or anything like that. But it might be some expertise, some guidance. That's where I think we do have a corporate responsibility. I've got a whole bunch of people that work with me that have great expertise, and there's no reason why that can't be shared with other organisations in the city. So one of the things I think that's come through from today, I think particularly with the workshops and really the breadth of sort of engagement really has amazed me as we've gone through the day. We've been looking at things like using text, if you like, as a medium in social media, but also using images and video. So this combination of lots of different media. Is that an approach that the BBC would welcome if we were like approaching you for support or to run a story or something like that? Is it that multiple style of media that's of interest to you?
It definitely is. I mean, the other thing I should say, the BBC is often accused of being an ivory tower and that people can't get access to it. And this is a way of kind of getting underneath that a bit. But also, there's a reason that's there. We do have an editorial responsibility to be separate and to be a critical friend. That's my role as an editor. I can work with people and organisations, and on one hand be advising an organisation, maybe particularly an organisation involved in the partnership, with some camera work or some advice on how someone might edit something. But on the other hand, and this is a partnership with the City Council, it doesn't stop us doing stories that one might regard as critical of the council. It doesn't stop us doing a story about asking George Ferguson, is it appropriate for him to swear at someone in the street when they've been bothering him. So there's a bit of a kind of, there's Neil as manager and representative of the BBC in the West Country, and there's Neil as editor, who absolutely understands his responsibility to reflect what's happening and to question authority, to question what's going on behalf of viewers that we have. So there is a difference there, and that's why there are two levels to this agreement, and it doesn't stop us investigating stuff, doesn't stop us looking into stuff and uncovering stuff. But at the same time, we are part of this community. And one of the great things for me about a programme like Points West is that at 6:30 we might be doing a story that reveals something that someone didn't want revealed. But then hopefully by nearly 7 o'clock we're telling a story about someone that's done something remarkable that uplifts you and makes you feel that there are people out there that are doing something different and helping our community.
I mean, one of the questions, just really sort of building on that, one of the questions that's come through on our Twitter hashtag today, was this whole idea about, okay, so what makes something newsworthy? So if I've been doing all these lovely projects, I've got all this engagement, I've got volunteers doing all these different things, what turns all of that kind of activity, be it a project or just day-to-day activity, what turns that into something that would be a hook for a journalist?
If I absolutely knew that, I'd probably be somewhere else making all of that happen all the time. I don't know. It's a lot of it's down to judgment. A lot of it's down to what happens on the day. A lot of it's down to it fitting with something else that's occurring. It can be any number of things. Absolutely, can be a whole range of things. The main thing I would say, I guess, in terms of dodging that question, would be to say, watch and listen, and judge for yourself what you think makes a story. I would guarantee this room would not agree on what I would determine would be the right agenda for Points West at 6:30 tonight. But I can guarantee to you, though, that that isn't done without a lot of thought, a lot of context, a lot of thinking about, so is that story in the right place? Is that the right one we go for today? An awful lot goes into that, and a whole section of decision making. And if you, a lot of people think they've watched the news or listened to Radio Bristol's breakfast programme or the Today programme, but have you really? I often used to find if you write it all down as it goes, you get a very different concept of what's happened in that programme. And suddenly you're realising that all sorts of things are in there. They're all by design, they're all there on purpose. But look at the stories and see which ones, maybe from the sector that you work in, strike you particularly. How have they been covered? And try and think how. Don't the next day replicate that, because journalists are notoriously short, have notoriously short vision, and the next day we're onto a brand new thing. And we are a bit like goldfish. We go round and round and round. But at the same time, it's about, sometimes stories have currency and they go on, they snowball. And we want people to try and reflect the local community. But it's a huge challenge because, we cover the entire, Points West covers the entire West Country, and a lot happens. So to get through it all, we get 300 or 400 news releases a day. So there's a lot to get through, but hopefully by the time we get to 6:30 in the evening, we've found what we think are the most important stories of the day. What I'd hope through this partnership, this is what I gain from this partnership, is that it connects us more with people that might tell us other things that are happening in the city, because I think it would be incredibly arrogant if we thought that each 6:30 programme in the evening was the West, what happened today. I'm sure a lot more happens. Hopefully we get to most of it, but I'd love it if this partnership started to yield a different insight into what makes the city tick and what makes the West Country tick.
Okay, so one of the questions that we had, because I invited questions for people to come up and actually ask sort of around lunchtime, one of the questions that we had, which actually for me was, I think, quite pertinent about this newsworthiness, was the fact that obviously some people in the room work with exceptionally vulnerable people. Now, whilst from a media perspective and from the public interest perspective, that might be a very exciting story, from the actual individual's perspective, that is something obviously that couldn't be put out into the public domain. How should an organisation or people like that deal with that kind of media or that kind of content, if you like? Because clearly it is of interest, but it's also very sensitive.
It's horrendously difficult, really difficult. I don't pretend to have all the answers on that one, to be honest. We're covering a story today on this partnership in the city, another partnership, but it's another really important one about human trafficking. And it's the first, I think it's Avon and Somerset Police and the City Council and various other organisers getting together to try and cope with it. And to be honest, in the morning meeting, we're saying, how on earth are we going to tell that story? Because it has no pictures. And the pictures that you could show, you wouldn't want to show. So I'm still not quite sure how we're going to do it, and it's only 2 hours until we do it. But actually, it's a really important story to tell. We will find a way. We do have ways as well of talking to, say, a vulnerable individual and keeping that person's anonymity. And sometimes, and we respect that anonymity absolutely, to the extent that we'll revoice what they say. We may not even use pictures of them, but it's their words still there. So there are always other ways of getting that story out, because as you'll know from working with individuals around in this city, it's not about the organisation, it's about the individuals, and that's what hits home. If again, I come back to watching the programme, think of the things that have an impact on you. Is it the person talking about the organisation, or is it the person who's had the organisation's influence and help and has changed their life? It's what lots of you guys do. You change people's lives. And those are the stories we try to do, because actually in the end of the day, we sometimes come to the end of a programme and say, well, it was a bit issuey today, or it was a bit, and that's what we're generally saying, is there weren't any real people in there. There were suits. And there weren't any real people talking about the impact on their lives. And that's what I would, again, back to this, that's what I would hope to seek, is through you, find people who have a story to tell, and with your guidance, we can try and do that, and we'll handle it as sensitively as we can. And we can give absolute anonymity, but that interview still has to take place. There's because we're trusted because of everything we do and the way we approach stuff, and so that the information that we give out, the case study that we go to, people trust us that that's a real case study that we've gone to and we've talked to them. So even if there aren't any pictures of them, their voice has been changed to another. I might voice it up or something like that. It's still their words, and it's their truth.
Right. So basically you're saying it is open to all, really, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. Obviously, as Neil's been talking, you might yourself have actually had questions that you didn't even think you had sort of prior to sort of Neil starting. So I just wanted to sort of put this out to the audience and just find out if you've got any specific questions that have now cropped up in your mind that you'd like to post to Neil. We have a roving mic. We have a question at the back row.
Hello there. I'm interested
how the BBC would use social media to, for example, gauge what might be trending or getting some kind of profile on, let's say, Facebook, or the comments you're seeing in your own social media channels before deciding whether to cover something. But then, to what extent do you think, okay, well, let's pick this story because it has legs. Let's pick a particular approach because we know this is bound to generate further conversations and give the story more mileage, which means that when you look to see, is this going to run for 6:30 or is it going to be something we can follow on tomorrow because the conversations or the controversy we might generate tonight? To what extent do you work with those two aspects of how you might be using social media and looking at the response from the community that might respond on those same platforms?
On the first point, we use social media more and more. As a journalistic tool, it is incredibly valuable. For instance, if an event were to happen out there, out there on the dockside, one of the things that we would very quickly do is do a geo-tagged search for a mile or so from that reference point, and we'd be looking for tweets about it, we'd be looking for pictures that people had tweeted. We might then get in touch with them to say, what have you seen? Could you be a sort of... So you're getting real eyewitnesses. So we're using that a lot. Pretty much everyone has some sort of social media profile now. So if someone is involved in the news that isn't normally in the news, we'll instantly look for their social profile. That might be images of them, that might be stuff they've been saying. So there's a lot out there that we as journalists would use, and you're gathering all of that in. We're using it ourselves as well. It's not unusual for one of my correspondents to pitch out, doing a story about this today. What do people think? Have anyone got any examples? And they use their own little social media community to sort of help them, which is quite an interesting device. We post a lot of stuff. Our Facebook page, actually the thing that gets looked at the most is the weather forecast, which is fine. But actually we asked the people that followed us on Facebook, do you think it's worthwhile? Because it's a bit of a hassle. We have to cut up the Ian Ferguson's weather forecast out of the programme and post it. So is it something that you want to see? Because actually you can get it on the BBC website as well. But we reached out to a different section of the community, and they said, yes, we would like... Yeah, they said they would like it, and now we have to do it. But it's fine, and actually it makes the page look like it's populated, it keeps it fresh, and hopefully Ian's delivering nice news as he is for the next few days. It's what you describe as the latter half, the second question, is a bit more, slightly more sinister, that we would try and generate more news. I guess that's the way I've received it, but we wouldn't intentionally do that. Actually, quite often it happens of its own accord, and I think if you try and pump prime it, we've tried it a few times just to see if a conversation carries on. I remember there was a story we did about a year or so ago, about a woman that won a case against a group of people in the street who were saying that God heals. And she won a case against them at Trades Descriptions Act thing. It was a bizarre story. But actually, it generated a whole load of conversations about belief. So we started a hashtag going, and just to see where it would go. And it went completely out of our control. And people were having a discussion around it. And we said, do we go back to it? I thought, no. Because actually it's moved on, it's morphed into something else. We also have to be a bit aware about the numbers involved. We all get quite excited about numbers of followers on Twitter or people that have liked you on Facebook. Unless you're in the realms of the Hollywood A-listers, or if you're a cast member of Hollyoaks or whatever, you're not getting the numbers that we're getting on telly. Still, there's a huge discrepancy. It's more of a personal contact, and it will grow, and we expect it to grow. But it's not unusual for Points West at 6:30 to be the most watched programme on television in the West Country. So when you look at the scale of that against how many people respond to something on Twitter. It's still a way off. So it's part of what we do, and it's a fantastic journalistic tool. And in terms of, we were talking about it, but in terms of you creating your social media profile, we use it a lot to look at what groups are out there, what representative groups, and actually if you've got an active social media presence, it might just get you more attention than you would as any other organisation. So it's definitely useful to be out there.
Great. There's another question at the front.
Hi, yeah. My question is about positive approaches to communities. As well as working here at Vosca, I work with Ujima Radio in St Paul's, and I'm conscious that whenever I look at stories, there does seem to be an overwhelming preponderance to look at the negative within those communities. And I'm not talking about when negative things specifically happen in the communities. I remember, I think it was nearly a year ago now, seeing something. There was a general article about drug use in the city, and the stock footage was a rolling shot up Grosvenor Road. And actually, to what extent is it almost lazy journalism to constantly look at those reinforcing negative images of what goes on within the communities? And it's not just St Paul's. I think the same type of coverage for Southmead, for Harcliffe, to Knoll West, etc. And is that partly because of the demographic of the journalists working in the newsroom? I don't know, or some other issue. The final thing I just wanted to say, which is kind of linked to that, and with St Paul's Carnival coming up on Saturday, is between 60 and 100,000 people are going to have a great time. And going back to your weather forecast, it's looking good if we can rely on that. But there will be bad instances. There will be some street crime. Hopefully, there'll be a minimum. There might be, unfortunately, knife crime of some form. Can I make a plea that that doesn't become the actual headline for that event as well? Because again, I appreciate it is almost a convention that when there's knife crime, that becomes the headline. The headline for me is 59,000 or 89,000 people had a great time and all these things happen, not that one instant happens. And unfortunately, all that does is just create more negativity. So when people want to set up businesses, apply for jobs and all the other things, they just have either direct discrimination or red line discrimination as a consequence of the way that that's reported. And I think the BBC has got potentially a more positive role to play if it just looks at what's going on in these communities from a slightly different perspective.
Good, a challenging one. On diversity in the workplace, I absolutely agree with you. And that part of what we're doing through the partnership is designed to, not just for the BBC, but for all media organisations, to better reflect the community. And it's somewhere we are trying to work towards. I would hope that evidence of things like Talent Ticket and Face to Face are evidence of a very overt and more intelligent approach to trying to change the workforce. Because there is an element, you're absolutely right. I have to have a workforce that represents the entire West Country, and it's not just about Bristol, but it doesn't say that the challenge isn't there as well. And I think we would all hit against some of the past practices in terms of forcing that. But actually, it's about creating an environment where hopefully more and more people from all sorts of backgrounds would be interested in working in the media, whether it's as part of as a camera crew or journalist on Points West, or an editor of Points West, or working for an independent television company in Bristol. The stereotypes of things like drug abuse, yes, that from what you said, that sounded like lazy journalism, and I would strive to go against that. And there would have to be a relevance to it. One of the things with pictures and stories you're trying to, what I try and push very hard against is just using pictures as wallpaper. There's got to be a reason that they're there, but some of them slip through. That isn't generally through a desire to stereotype. It's more, I think in that case, it sounds like it probably was a lazy use of some shots to try and cover a script that was talking about something else. So it's like with the trafficking story I'm talking about, there will be lots of pictures there that will try and describe that story, but it's hard. I work in a visual medium, and sometimes, it's another thing, sometimes some of your stories, if they haven't got pictures with them, they're really hard to tell, because if you think about it from the viewer's point of view, then if it's just pictures rolling across and words, they don't have the same impact. And that's what we're trying to have. We're trying to have an impact for people. And St Paul's, I would say that we've done our fair share of celebrating that event as well. And I would hope we can be regarded in the past of having done that as well. Inevitably, there have been incidents in the past, and we've covered them. What I hope doesn't. My problem is that actually often those at the top of the programme, by the end of the programme, we're celebrating the event. And actually, I remember commissioning a poem all about the event a few years ago, which we've used again and again and again. It is part of the fabric of the city, and I hope we reflect it. Sometimes. Now, that's where we come back to being the critical friend. We have to see other aspects of it. But you're absolutely right. It has to be proportionate, because 50, 60, 70,000 people who have who enjoy the event, as opposed to a few minor incidents. It's about proportionality.
Right. We're not going to have time for any other questions, but if you've got any specific things you'd like to address with Neil, hopefully Neil will have 5 minutes afterwards to talk to you sort of one-to-one. I'd just like to bring in, is now a good time, Rachel? Bring in Rachel, because Rachel's going to have a brief chat now about this little thing that's followed us as a thread throughout the day, our little hashtag, because going forward, this will potentially be the thing that will bond everyone in this room together going forward with a shared purpose, I guess, and a shared sort of glue online.
Thank you very much. For those of you who haven't already met me, my name's Rachel Clark. I'm the Communications Coordinator at Norwest Media Centre, and I delivered the social media workshop. And as you can see over my shoulder, it's still updating the Twitter feed that we were introduced to this morning by Sean. And I've just been looking at everything that's been posted, and from what I can count, there have been 39 different people tweeting about this event, which I think is really impressive, and some of whom I don't recognise, who I think are actually not here, but they're watching the event online. So I just really wanted to encourage you, as seasoned tweeters or new tweeters, to use hashtagging at your events, because it certainly can have a lot of really positive outcomes for you. So for you as organisations, if you identify a term that you want to use for an event, like we did with Voscom, I'd firstly encourage you to do a bit of research to see if it's being used already. If it is, and you want to use something that's already in existence, then that's fine. But if you'd prefer something that's wholly your own, that people have to type because they want to, rather than just by accident, do a bit of research and see if anything exists. We spent some time together and Voska and the planning team thinking of Voscom, because we knew people wouldn't type that by accident, and you'd have to look at it and type it in yourselves. So we didn't get any odd posts that weren't meant to be there. Secondly, I'd really encourage you to tell people about the tag that you're using, which is why we told you all in advance, and put it up on the website, and those of us that had Twitter accounts tweeted with it, so people can come prepared to use a tag at an event. And then also, if you're giving out literature or you're putting up posters, pop it on there. So even if they didn't read their pack when they first came, they still have that information there. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits, really, for you as organisations. You can document an event and see it as it unfolded. So if you go back over the Voscom feed, you'll see that people were tweeting this morning, I'm just on my way to Voska, great coffee, when they were getting set up and settling down. And then they were tweeting in their workshops, talking about their networking, what they wanted to learn as well, and what they also had learned. You can see that event unfold. And as an organisation, you can find a way of archiving that, so you've got a record of everything that was said about your event as it happened. Then that can go on to be used in publicity, perhaps in evaluation, so you've got that for your own records. It's also a great way to gather feedback, as I've mentioned, and have a multiplicity of voices, because it's not just you saying our event was brilliant. It's other people endorsing it too and saying what they learn, and there's a real power in endorsements from other people. So really, I'd encourage you to make use of it for that reason. You're attracting the attention of other people who aren't perhaps there in person. So some of the people who tweeted today, one of them said, "Voska, I really wish I was at VosCon with you because it sounds great." And that person wasn't there, but really wanted to be. So you're attracting the attention of people outside the room with your tag, which can go on to have future benefits for you. And also you can respond in the event to things that people are saying on Twitter. So at the end of our first session, you highlighted that people had asked, what's a KPI and what's a CIM? And as a group, we could shout, oh, it's a key performance indicator. And we could help each other by just reading the tweets online and then responding in kind. So somebody earlier said, how can I charge my phone? And then Sean over at Voska said, we've got power, come and see us. So it's a way of creating the relationships online and in person, and you can use those things together really for your advantage. So I think those are great benefits for you, but also for participants at events. People really feel like they can contribute, that their voice really is listened to, and it's not just you as an organisation telling them how great the event was, it's a space for them to add their feedback to, so that's quite empowering for people. And finally, those who can't attend can see what's happening. Your event has a live presence on the web, just as it's happening live here, it's got a live presence online. So if you do have any questions about the use of hashtags, then do talk to me, to Paul, or to the team at Voska, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. But I want to thank you all for using the hashtag and for giving your feedback, because it's certainly been helpful to find out what other people have enjoyed and things that we needed to respond to today. We have been. So thank you very much.
Great, well, thank you, Rachel. And we've reached the end of Communicate. So well done for sticking with it. Hopefully you found this a really useful day. Obviously, we've approached this from a number of different directions, looking at words, looking at images, looking at video. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Rachel this morning for her presentation, for Neil this afternoon, and of course to all of the partners who have been running the workshops and providing you hopefully with some really, really valuable insight. Just a little bit to end on from me, because I kind of do this stuff as well. I'm kind of addicted to this stuff and spend quite a bit of time doing it. And over the years, there's one little sort of golden rule that I've sort of followed, and I'm yet to disprove it in any industry that I work with. And it's what I call my golden rule of thirds. And when I'm publishing stuff in social media, 1/3 of what I publish is about me. So that's me personally, or me, my company, my business. 1/3 is what I call free stuff, and that's signposting to other people. So for you, it could be signposting to other people in the room and sharing all the different sort of good work and good practice that you're doing. And then 1/3 is the sell. 1/3 is the come to my event. 1/3 is, come to, sort of engage with me or volunteer or whatever that happens to be. And that rule of thirds seems to be a really neat way of balancing your social networking activity. 1/3 about you, 1/3 free stuff, signposting, and 1/3 the overt sell. So I'll just leave you with that little thought, and maybe you go away and prove or disprove it and share on #VosCon whether or not it worked for you as well. So thank you very much for attending today. If you could, as I say, with the reward of chocolate, complete your pink form and leave that as you actually leave the room, and a safe journey. Thank you.
This download was produced by the Ecomedia Collective, a social business focusing on sound, sharing and social change. More information? See the website at soundsharechange.com. That's soundsharechange.com.